Hey guys, I just want to remind you that this podcast is a ministry of Sovereign Grace Family Church. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can go to our website at sgfcjax.org. Also, I want to remind you about our important podcast partners, including our longest-running partner, Tiny Bibles. If you go to tinybibles.com, you'll find the smallest printed Bible on the market. It's available in the King James, New King James, and the New American Standard Version. And if you use my name, Keith, in the coupon code, you'll get a discount. Also, I want to remind you about Squirrely Joe's Coffee, some of the best coffee in the world, and it's shipped directly to your home. And if you go to squirrelyjoes.com/yourcalvinist, you'll get a free bag. Also, if you use my name, Keith, in the coupon code, you'll get 20% off your next order. Striving for Eternity Ministries offers Bible conferences for churches of just about any size. They do an array of topics, including apologetics, evangelism, creation, the family, and much more. So if you're interested in having them come and do a conference for your church, reach out to Striving for Eternity Ministries, and you'll find their information in the description below. This episode is also brought to you by Dominion Wealth Strategists. Be sure to watch for the commercial during this episode to see how they can serve you.
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me so heavy, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. Calvinistically speaking, so I mix a manly drink, Pepsi and shoe polish, and I hit the YouTube link. Don't say hit, that sounds violent. And I feel my troubles all melt away. Oh, it's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Bosky. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Bosky. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
And welcome back to Your Calvinist Podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I am your Calvinist. Normally on Tuesday nights, my wife and I come into the studio and we respond to email questions that you guys send in through our website. But currently, we are away on vacation. So what we decided to do for our normal Tuesday night live show is to play a pre-recorded interview that I did with a special guest. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in just a moment. Now remember, because this is playing live, you guys will still be able to interact with each other in the comments. And Lord willing, even though we're going to be out of town, we're probably going to jump on our phone and interact with you during this live broadcast. So we hope you enjoy the interview that we put together, and we look forward to seeing all of you when we return for our next live show, which will be July 29th at 9 p.m. All right, guys, may God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you when we get back. The Southern Baptist Convention was held recently, and even though it's been a few weeks, I thought it would be important to go back and talk about some of the important decisions that were made during the SBC, talk about some of the controversies that went on, but also some of the good things that happened. And I've invited with me today one of my favorite preachers in the entire world, and I say that without any attempt. I'm not attempting to flatter him in any way. He knows this. I've told him both publicly and privately. I love him so much and love his preaching. Michael Shultz is with me today. Michael, thank you for being on Your Calvinist Podcast with me today.
Thanks, brother. It's always an honor to be back.
Yep, and you've been on the show a couple times before. We talked about the history of your church and the doctrines and theology of your church. You also have probably one of the more popular shows I've ever done among non-Calvinists, and that is when you came on with me to talk about Calvinism and the love of God. Leighton Flowers even picked up on that show and had some thoughts about what we said, and actually had some compliments for some of what was said. So you've been on now several times, and I'm thankful for you continuing to come back and be part of the show. And just for an introduction for anybody who doesn't know you or hasn't seen the previous episodes, would you tell us where you are, where you pastor, and also about your work with Forge Theological Seminary?
Yeah, so I'm Michael Shultz. I pastor Antioch Baptist Church in Lewisburg, Kentucky, a small, what probably is normative size Baptist church. We average about 70 or so on a given Sunday. We are Southern Baptist, as you probably guessed looking at the video. So our official confession of faith is the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. But I generally, just as the pastor, have a rule that I invite people to preach who affirm the 1689 or some like-minded Reformed Baptist confession of faith. So that's something that is more informally held. You don't have to be a Reformed Baptist to be a member here, but you do have to be a Reformed Baptist to preach here, kind of thing. That's the way that I do it. I have several people in my church who are not Calvinist. Just like I have people in my church who aren't premillennial. I have people in my church that are very different from me in the way that I believe. And as long as we can come together on the foundational truths, I'm comfortable with that. You mentioned Forge. So I'm a associate professor of church history and director of institutional advancement at Forge Theological Seminary, which is based out of Fort Mills, South Carolina. We're a confessionally reformed seminary offering everything from certificates in biblical counseling through to doctoral degrees. We have a doctor of ministry, a doctor of theology, and now an accredited doctor of philosophy degree. So we're growing and doing very well. I've got a partnership, a reciprocation agreement that's going to be hopefully agreed to here in the next couple of days. All the paperwork's out, and so we'll be announcing that. That'll interest a lot of people. But I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, the Baptist Faith and Message as being the document, because you are SBC. Do you have any issues with that when you are? Because I know it was brought together by guys who it was, as I understand it, sort of made to where you could affirm it as a Calvinist or as a non-Calvinist. But is there any part of it that you struggle with, or you think it's bland? When I say bland, that's a wrong word. Maybe generic enough or open enough to where it doesn't really affect you being reformed. Bland is a bad word. I didn't mean it in the way that sounds like I'm being negative. I'm not trying to be negative.
It's not inaccurate. Yeah, no, that's not an inaccurate way of describing it. I think R.C. Sproul, when they came out with the SBC 2000 or the BF&M 2000, R.C. Sproul said it was thoughtfully vague. And I thought that was a pretty good way of summarizing it. Thoughtfully vague. I don't have any qualms with the BF&M. There's one section that I think is probably the closest thing to being a problem for me, which it's talking about the fall. And it talks about sin. And so it says that through the temptation of Satan, man transgressed the command of God and fell from his original innocence, whereby his posterity inherit a nature and an environment inclined towards sin. So far, so good. But this line, therefore, as soon as they are capable of moral action, they become transgressors and are under condemnation. So you have what most people would recognize as the age of accountability kind of codified into the statement. I've struggled more with that sentence than anything else in the whole statement. For the most part, all of it's good. It's just that one statement, when they're capable of moral action, they become actual transgressors. I wonder about, so the BF&M 2000, just to give a bit of background for anybody that might not know. So the Baptist Faith and Message was written originally in 1925, based on the New Hampshire Confession. Largely at the hands of E.Y. Mullins and a group of other guys along with him. It was edited, revised in 1963 to address inerrancy. They thought they were clear enough. They weren't. 1998, they revised it again to address marriage because we had the gay rights movement coming in. And then in 2000, they just completely overhauled the entire thing, because we were going through and completing what we call the conservative resurgence, or people on the outside call it the fundamentalist takeover. And you had a bunch of people in the room, but the two guys that really, they were at the head of the table is Al Mohler and Adrian Rogers. And Al Mohler, a thoroughgoing Calvinist, Adrian Rogers absolutely despised Calvinism. And so if those two guys can leave a room agreeing on everything that we wrote, this is going to be very vague. So I think that was somewhat the point. We'll get these two guys who disagree on most everything that we would call a secondary doctrine outside of like baptism. And we'll just let them figure out what's important. And that's what we've not, that's an oversimplification, obviously, but that's That's the way that I like to think of it, that there's like a bunch of people around a table and then Al Mohler and Adrian Rogers talking.
Yeah,
that's the way that I envision it.
The other guys are listening to them. Yeah, they're wanting to they're wanting to hear where they come down. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. So this year's SBC, you had the opportunity to go. While you were there, you wrote some very positive things on Facebook. Obviously, you and I have been friends now for several years. I follow you on Facebook and read your posts. And you were even mentioning, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned something like, there's a lot of negative that people say, but I'm really enjoying this. I'm not wording it exactly as you did, but basically you were like, this is a positive thing. This is a good thing. The SBC has a lot of good. And am I remembering that right? Was that you who posted that?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. So if we could, just as we're going through the SBC today and talking about, can we start with the positive, start with the things that you think are good and you enjoyed before we get to, because I want to ask you about some of the other things, the ERLC, the law amendment, things like that, things I don't even know that I understand, because I know these are questions people have, and maybe you don't know it all, but you're an SBC guy and I'm not. And from the outside, it makes me curious, because the SBC is the largest Baptist church convention in the United States. It's the largest, some people say largest Protestant denomination, but again, there's issues of how do we define denomination? How do we define, all those terms, but it's certainly the largest group of churches in the United States are Southern Baptist churches. And so I think people should care what's going on. I think people should care about the SBC, even if they're not SBC. I'm not, but I care about what happens there, because I think it does act in a somewhat of a barometer of the overall landscape of evangelicalism in America. So that's the reason why I care, and I hope other people want to know too. But tell me the good stuff.
Well, so you mentioned it, the largest Protestant denomination in the Western Hemisphere, at least. We called for the reversal of Obergefell publicly. I think we're the only group that's doing that. You won't see a lot of Republican senators or congressmen and women who are willing to publicly say they're against gay marriage today, even though we're only 10 years down the road from that. We had, the largest Protestant denomination in the Western Hemisphere still publicly saying, we're not changing our opinion on this. Who was the actor where the woman was saying, once upon a time you said you should slap women, and he said, I haven't changed my opinion. What was the guy's name? Who was that?
Well, it was Sean Connery.
Sean Connery, yeah.
Sean Connery.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I haven't changed my opinion.
Yeah, I haven't changed my opinion.
That's not funny.
And it's like,
I'm laughing at Sean Connery. I'm not laughing at hitting women. For anybody who are listening and think I'm not, I'm laughing at the fact that I know what you said, what he said in context is like, yeah, he hasn't changed. Okay. So before anybody sends me an ugly email, I was laughing at that, not at the obviously abuse is bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the I felt that way when the SBC is like, yeah, we should overturn gay marriage. And I feel that like the American media, even the conservatives, they would look at the SBC and say, you're saying we should overturn gay marriage. And we're going, yeah, I haven't changed my opinion. We have not changed our opinion. We're exactly what we said 30 years ago, 50 years ago. We have not changed our opinion. And I think that's something. It's weird that would be worth celebrating, but that's important. We did commission another 58 international missionaries. Several of them, we can't even say their names because they're going to security 3 areas of the world where their safety would be jeopardized. The president or executive director, whatever his title is, of the IMB says they've got 1,600 people in the pipeline training to be international missionaries right now. That encourages me. I mean, we have the second largest missionary agency in the world behind only the Mormons. And it's mandatory for them because they don't go to whatever version of heaven they think they go to if they don't do it. So that's the only group that have more missionaries going out than Southern Baptist is the people who think you go to hell if you don't do it. So, I mean, this is a huge thing. The there's one initiative called Crossover 2025, and I didn't know about this until the SBC itself. When the annual meeting is coming to your city, so this year it was in Dallas, all of our seminaries have evangelism classes, and you can get college credit if you go to the city where the SBC meeting is going to be, like I think 2 weeks ahead, 1 week ahead maybe, and you do evangelism that entire week in the city. And so it's street evangelism, but it's also evangelism. Like they showed pictures of people going into laundromats in Dallas, and they would offer to pay for somebody's laundry, give them some detergent and softener. And then while we're waiting for your load of laundry, can we talk to you about the gospel? And I mean, it's really well done. From that, they said they visited 2,955 homes, engaged 17,058 people, and had 711 professions of faith. Just from that. And I know the cynics, they'll say, well, this is probably Billy Graham type evangelism. Let's pray and ask Jesus into your heart right now. No, they connect them to a local Baptist church. That's a Southern Baptist church in Dallas. And they get them in their pipeline to be visited by that pastor. We had the largest number of salvation and baptism increase since the 90s. And this is something that people are missing when you see these reports that membership in the Southern Baptist Convention is going down. So we used to have something like, I think when I went in Nashville in 2020, 2021, we had something like 47,000 churches. Now it's closer to 46. And so you say, well, what's going on with these churches closing and why is the membership going down? Well, number one, I can give you an example from my church. When I came to my church in 2019, the average attendance was 17 and the membership roll was 272. And so I went through in 2021, we spent a whole year doing a membership purge. We now have an average attendance of about 72 and our membership roll is 80. And so we have actually gotten our roll to reflect the people who attend here by cutting 200 people off the roll. And that's one little country church in the backwoods of Kentucky. So when you have 40,000 churches that do that, and they're actually becoming healthier churches, you can see how the membership would drop dramatically because it was inflated for decades. The alternative of that is that our attendance on average has gone up. So salvations, baptisms, and average attendance has all gone up dramatically in Southern Baptist churches while membership has gone down. And I think that's positive. I think that's a really good thing because we're taking better care of our membership rolls. Pastors are actually aware of who their congregation is, and they're caring for the souls in the way that Romans 13 would put it. They watch for your souls. They actually are accountable for their souls. Two more things I'll say on this, and then I'll let you jump in. Of the top 10 states in baptisms, 4 of them were outside the American South. So when you call it the Southern Baptist Convention, that's increasingly not the case. One of the top 10 states in baptisms in the SBC was the state of New York. So we're having tons of growth outside of the American South. Churches in the North American Mission Board's planting program, 4 years after being planted, 89% of them are still operating. So 9 out of 10 churches that we plant every single year will still be running 4 years down the road. And we plant so many churches that by 2030, 1/3 of the churches in our convention will have been planted since 2010. So the small country churches like mine that are 200 plus years old, well, a lot of them are closing. And that's because I can give you something very interesting about that. Mark Dever and Dr. Presley, or not yet Dr. Presley, he's in the Demon program at Southern. He's our president right now. And Al Mohler, they were talking about this at 9 Marks at 9 one night. And they asked, why do you think small churches in the country are closing? And Al Mohler said, well, it's 2 things. It's number one, small communities are dying. People are gravitating towards cities because of jobs. But then he said the other reason that small churches are closing is because of you, Mark, and because of you, Clinton Presley. And he's looking at Mark Dever and Clint Presley, and he's saying it's because of them. And so it's like, okay, you've got all of our attention. And he said, 50 years ago, you think 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, a young man would get a B.Div or an M.Div and come out of seminary, and he would get a job at a small church, and he would work there for a couple of years, and then he would move to First Baptist Church of County Seat Town, and then he would kind of work his way up the ladder. And all these churches had one pastor. And so you had these little country churches that were like starter churches for new ministers. And then you had like a progressive hierarchy of churches with experience and education. He said, now a guy comes out of Southern with an MDiv or a DMin, and he doesn't want to take a small church in the country. He wants to go be an intern at Capitol Hill Baptist Church with Mark Dever, or he wants to go be an associate pastor at a church with a plurality of elders because their ecclesiology is changing. And so we don't have so many guys that want to be solo pastors at little churches. They want to be on a plurality of elders church or intern under an experienced pastor. And that's not bad. That's not a bad thing by any stretch. It's just that's what's happening. So these little churches like mine, they can't get anybody because the guys with MDivs have too much debt to take a job with a low income like this, or they have an ecclesiology that leads them to want to go to a plurality of elders church. And the alternative is they take a pastor who has no education, no experience, truth be told, doesn't have any business being in the ministry, and they just come in and wreck the church. And so that there's so many factors behind why churches are closing and why the membership is shrinking. But I was super encouraged by the number of baptisms, the number of salvations, the average attendance all going up, and seeing that our doctrinal fidelity is maintained.
That was so much to think about, especially that last part about why smaller churches are dying. I do want to make a comment, though. I want to take a step back to when you were talking about the purging of the church rolls, because that's something I've experienced somewhat in our own town. The largest Baptist church in Jacksonville used to be First Baptist downtown. Now, it may still be by the numbers. I mean, they have like 6 city blocks of buildings and everything else. I mean, but they have sold property and things over the years. And so I don't know if they still have that much, but there was a time when they had the largest, or one of the largest Southern Baptist churches in the United States was First Baptist Jacksonville. They had like 30,000 people on the roll, but they didn't have 30,000 people coming to church. They did not have 30,000 people on a Sunday throughout their multiple services. It was 30,000 people that had been baptized there. And here's the thing. I went forward at First Baptist Church when I was a little boy. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it meant you got to get in the pool. That's literally but I'm one of probably several hundred people, if not several thousand people, who have just gone forward at First Baptist Church. And then, they take you back to a little room. They have a guy fill out a card. I'm probably on the roll. You know what I mean? Like from having gone forward. So that 30,000 number was
Southern
not
Baptist.
Realistic. Yeah. See, it's being... We're exposing Keith today. Keith is a true Southern Baptist, having gone forward when he was 5 years old at First Baptist Church of Jacksonville. But the idea of little churches and the atmosphere of little churches changing, that's a whole other. I mean, I may have to bring you back on for another podcast just to talk about that, because I do a weekly call-in show, or not call-in, a write-in show. People write emails in, and I answer questions. My wife and I, she reads a question, I answer the question. We do a live show every Tuesday. And one of the most common questions I get is from new pastors, just asking about the logistics of ministry. How often do you, how long do you spend on your sermons? What does your week look like? Things like that. Just normal questions that guys ask when they're new to the ministry. And one of the more recent questions I have received is, in fact, I think it's on my list for tonight, is on the question of, there's a guy who's 40 years old. He feels called to the ministry, and he wants to know, is it right for him to now go into seminary, do the MDiv program, which is going to cost him a lot of money. It's going to be there's going to be an expense related to getting that Master of Divinity. And he wants to know what he should do. I mean, and again, he's just asking my opinion. He's not, I'm not mentoring him or anything. He's just saying, here's my situation. And I do think the landscape is different now than it was even 20 years ago when I was pastoring, as far as what people are expecting when they go to seminary, when they come out, and what you just mentioned, the debt. It's crazy. If you go to, a accredited seminary or something like that, you're going to pay a lot. I think that's one of the things Forge does is tries to make it affordable. And I promise this is not a commercial for Forge Theological Seminary. For anybody listening, I don't think like this was we're backdooring a commercial here, but you guys try to make it affordable, right? I mean,
right.
Is that
yeah.
wrong?
And that's
is that
a big
wrong
part of
question?
it is we're trying to train people for the church. No. It's all good. We're trying to train people for the church. Of course, we have a slogan. It's an unofficial slogan. We're trying to put you into ministry, not into debt. And it's because that is true. There are so many people that they come out of seminary and they have so much debt that they really can't take a pastoral job. Because if I have $25,000 in debt, and a church that's looking for a guy and is willing to hire a person with 0 years of pastoral experience, I don't mind to tell people, when I got hired here at Antioch, I had been an interim pastor at a church before, and I'd been a discipleship pastor, but I had no full-time senior pastoring experience. Their entry-level salary was $27,300 a year. There's no way. If I had gone to Southern or Midwestern or Southwestern, one of these schools that are really good, Southern Baptist seminaries, if I had gone to any one of them, I could not have possibly taken this job, because just with the debt that I had from undergraduate, I'm already at a real tension point here. But if I had that elevated graduate level debt, there's no way. And it's not necessarily the seminary's fault. It's just the culture that we're in, but that is a real problem for a lot of young guys and even middle-aged and older guys.
What do you think for the future of, and I know this is not the SBC, but this is just because I have you on, do you think the future is going to move more toward seminaries like Forge and others where there's not a as much like on-campus participation and things like that, but it's to reduce the cost and make it more available to a wider audience? Do you think that's the future of Christian education for ministers?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be to our peril, because I even though I'm somebody, so I did my MDiv online, and I've done all of my graduate work largely online. I did my undergraduate work in person and my graduate work online. I am the first to admit to anybody, online education is not of the same quality as in-person education. It's not. And as somebody who's a professor at an online seminary, I don't think we're being transparent with people if we don't admit that. When you are in person getting education, you get a better education. There's just no way of duplicating it. And our seminaries, even in the Southern Baptist Convention, to stick with the subject, we've never had an online PhD program. So Southern Seminary just rolled out this year its first ever all online PhD program. And I know that the reason they're doing that is to keep up with the market, but it's to our peril. I don't think that's going to be good for us. I think about the education that I got in my undergrad in person versus the education that I got in my graduate online, and it's just not comparable.
Hi, my name's Justin Johnson.
And I'm Josiah Stowe.
And we are Dominion Wealth Strategists. We are created to put money in the hands of those that are sitting in the pews.
From budgeting to estate planning, savings accounts, retirement planning, life insurance, and a heck of a lot more here at Dominion.
That means that you are leaving an inheritance that passes multiple generations, because that is the legacy. It's part of our mission.
All of Christ for all of life.
And all of finance for Christendom.
Fellowship, faith, and a good cup of coffee. The gospel shines brightest when shared over stories, prayers, and a cup of our locally roasted coffee. Squirrely Joe's Coffee, brewing conversations that matter. Share his word, sip his grace. Visit squirrelyjoes.com and order coffee to the glory of God.
What if your family's financial strategy was built on more than just numbers? What if it was built on Scripture? At Private Family Banking, we believe managing wealth is more than just good planning. It's a God-given privilege and responsibility. In Genesis and Deuteronomy and all the way into the New Testament, God calls us to be fruitful, wise, and faithful with what He provides. We help Christian individuals, families, and small businesses grow, protect, and pass on wealth anchored in timeless biblical principles to the glory of God and the advancement of His kingdom. Schedule your free discovery call today at liberationeconomy.com.
So we talked about the positive part of the SBC and the things that you saw, missionaries and standing up against the divergence of the culture against God's word. Those are all good and positive things. But there's also things that always come out of the SBC that cause people to be concerned and cause a lot of, issues. And I know over the last few years, several people have chosen to leave the SBC. I mean, I have friends who are in churches that have chosen to leave the SBC. So what are some of the things that were more controversial, and how did you feel like they were handled during the SBC?
Yeah, so this was the third consecutive year that we've seen some version of what's called the Law Amendment. This year it was called the Sanchez Amendment. And this is an amendment to amend the Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention such that if you employ a pastor of any kind who is a female, then you would be considered or deemed not in good fellowship with the Southern Baptist Convention. And this is the third year that it's gotten over 60% approval, but that's not enough. You have to get a 2/3 majority. So it's 66.6% plus 1. And so the law amendment for the second year in a row failed. The first year it was put forward, it passed, but it has to be approved 2 years in a row, and that didn't happen. The reason that it didn't happen is different. Last year in Indianapolis, it didn't pass because a lot of our more moderate, or somebody might want to say the more liberal-leaning individuals in the SBC, guys like J.D. Greear, who is a former president, or Ed Litton, who is a former president, they came out against the law amendment because they said that this would cause problems for churches that have such a thing as, say, a children's minister, or, a women's pastor. And on the face of it, so like your audience is probably going to say, yeah, those churches are anathema anyway, because if you have a woman that's a women's pastor or, a children's minister, that's unbiblical. In the Southern Baptist Convention, that's pretty tame. When you think about where we've come from in the last 30 years. So people just don't understand. 30 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention, I think if you go back into the late 80s, the Southern Baptist Convention approved a resolution that was explicitly in favor of abortion. So you can't, you just can't imagine how liberal the Southern Baptist Convention used to be, and what happened through the 80s and 90s. So when you're talking about getting rid of every church that has a children's pastor who's a woman, or an executive pastor for that matter, a lot of churches that are larger churches have executive pastors that are more or less what we would call a treasurer in a small church. And they're women. They have no preaching capacity whatsoever. They never get behind the pulpit, but they address children, or they address only women, or they only address finances, but they're called pastor. Those churches would be disfellowshipped from the Southern Baptist Convention. And so guys like J.D. Greear and Ed Litton came out last year in Indianapolis, and they said, that's ridiculous. Like, this is not even what the people who are advocating for the amendment want to happen. And so there were enough people who said, yeah, we don't want that to happen. We'll just leave it up to the Credentials Committee, which is this committee that the Southern Baptist Convention has, where if your church is doing something that's contrary to the Southern Baptist faith, someone can report your church, and the Credentials Committee contacts you, and they reach out and try to figure out if you are in good fellowship with what Southern Baptists believe. Well, that sounded good until 2024 to 2025. The Credentials Committee reached out to a church that had been reported that was called New Spring Church in South Carolina. They had a woman on their website that was listed as a pastor. She has a preaching capacity. They are unapologetic about the fact that they believe that women can be pastors. And the Credentials Committee came back and they said, yeah, no problem there. And everyone in the SBC went, what? Like, what do you mean? That's exactly the church that we're saying we don't think should be in good fellowship. And the same thing happened in Alaska. There was a church in Alaska called Rabbit Creek that they actually were maintained in good fellowship, even though they had a woman pastor. The executive director of the Alaska Baptist Convention, pretty much the president of the Alaska Baptist Convention, was a member of their church. And they were maintained. They ultimately did disfellowship them, or whatever you want to say, and the executive director resigned. But we had this problem where the Credentials Committee has a hard time doing what I think the vast majority of Southern Baptists would want done, which is where we draw a very hard line on what it means to be a pastor. And if you're under the title pastor, then you can't be a woman. The reason that it failed this year was because of the new president of the executive committee, a guy named Jeff George. He's the former president at Gateway Seminary. He got up and he said that if we write into the Constitution that we will remove churches if they have female pastors, we open ourselves up to litigation. And so we'll probably be sued because we've done this. And everybody cries foul, and they say, well, that's ridiculous. They can't sue us for having doctrinal distinctives. And what he's getting at, and I think this is true, is that we won't be sued for removing a church for having a female pastor. We'll be sued for some other thing. So right now, there's a pastor, I think it's in Tennessee, who he was accused of sexual misconduct. And it was reported to the Southern Baptist Convention. We have this anonymous line now where you can report that, because we had this whole fiasco about that a couple of years ago. And he was reported. And so the SBC's appropriate sexual assault commission, or whatever they want to call it, reached out. And they start asking people in the community and in the church, and people who are pertinent to that issue, if they knew of this guy having committed any sort of sexual misconduct. Well, word starts getting around that the SBC has been told this guy's a sexual deviant, and that he's committed misconduct, and that he's being investigated for sexual misconduct. His church puts him on leave, ultimately fires him. He applies to get a job at another church. They find out about this. They won't hire him. And so he's suing the Southern Baptist Convention for defamation, because in doing the investigation, he's saying they have cost him his livelihood, and they've defamed him by even allegating that he might have committed sexual misconduct. And the SBC tried to get it thrown out of court, but the Tennessee Supreme Court upheld his right to sue the SBC for that. And so that's what Dr. George is saying, is that if we put this in our Constitution and we make it a legal thing, the first time we remove a church for having a female pastor, it's not going to be a matter of we remove them because their doctrine differed from ours. They're going to sue us for something along the lines of defamation or something like that, that doesn't have anything to do with our doctrine, but has everything to do with the way that it's been carried out. And so even though I think the vote came out this year on the Sanchez Amendment, it was 61% for, 39% against. That was the big reason why it didn't pass, was people were convinced by Dr. George that there might be some sort of a litigation problem that flows out of that if we make it a legal issue rather than a doctrinal issue.
Well, what are you... do you think that should keep it out of the Constitution? Do you think it should just stay with the Credentials Committee? I'm asking you your opinion, Michael Shultz, not, I know you're not as a representative of the SBC, but just personally, do you think that's the right way to go? Or do you think it should just be put in the Constitution and let the legal chips fall where they will?
I really don't know. I left the convention. I mentioned this in a review video that I did. I voted for the law amendment all 3 years. Just because I do think that it's appropriate for us to be as clear as we possibly can in every document that we can. But the fact that it failed didn't bother me, because I also think Dr. George isn't stupid. I think he probably has a point. He probably knows what he's talking about. And so if it's possible that we could be sued and the people that voted against it are worried about that, I'm not upset about that. I would love to see it pass, but I'm not at all upset that it didn't, because I understand why the people voting against it did so.
Gotcha. So how does that relate? And I appreciate that explanation of the law amendment, because I've heard that term thrown around, and I didn't understand how it all tied together. Again, not being on the inside, I've got friends who talk to me about things, but I don't always know what's going on, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not right in the midst of everything. But how does that relate to the ERLC and what's going on with that? Because that's an entirely different issue, right? Or am I saying it right? Is it ERLC?
I'm sorry. Are you talking about? Yeah, the ERLC. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. So the ERLC has always been the problem child of the Southern Baptist Convention. It receives.
What does that stand for? What is ERLC?
The Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission.
Okay.
I think it receives something like 1.6% of our total budget. Now, mind you, the total budget of the Southern Baptist Convention is something like $200 million a year. So 1% is not nothing, but it is 1%. Sure. It's a whole lot of headache is what it is. It's always been that. It was founded as the Social Security Commission, and then in the 50s they changed the name to the Christian Life Commission, and now they call it the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. What it's supposed to be is the arm through which the Southern Baptist Convention contends for Southern Baptist distinctives on a public level. So you could say it's our lobbying arm. Is the way. That's probably not the way that anybody would want it to be framed, but that's the way that I would frame it. We throw money and we lobby with senators and congressmen and women, and we send petitions and, all of that. That's what it's meant to do. The problem with the ERLC that everybody has is what they're in favor of. It's usually in line with Southern Baptist, but sometimes not. So notably, there was a bill in Louisiana that would have abolished abortion and criminalized it. And the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission came out against that bill because it would have put women who committed abortion in jail. They would have been legally culpable for murder for killing their children. And so, and that's the official position of most abolitionists that I know. So the abolitionists were understandably pretty upset that the ERLC, which is the Southern Baptist arm that's supposed to be contending for Southern Baptist causes, came out against that. But they came out against it because the ERLC has been instructed by the Southern Baptist Convention that the SBC is not abolitionist, it's pro-life. And so we can get upset about that, but the reality is, as we keep finding out year after year after year, the Southern Baptist Convention is not abolitionist. It's pro-life. They are not in line with abolitionism. And, there was a motion this year. I was going to make it. Another guy, I think Brian Gunter is his name, ended up making it, to bring out a resolution made by Senator Devers out in Oklahoma that was abolitionist. And it overwhelmingly failed. I mean, it was like 90+% of the room voted against even hearing that resolution on abolitionism. So the SBC is clearly not abolitionist. They're firmly pro-life, but definitely not abolitionist. And that's what most people are upset about with the ERLC. There have been some other things. We're in a new world when it comes to the ideas about religious liberty, the separation of church and state. So most Reformed Baptists, when they think of religious liberty and the separation of church and state, they're influenced enough by theonomy or Christian nationalism that they wouldn't be in support of, say, a Southern Baptist defending a Muslim's right to build a mosque in a city that doesn't have one. Southern Baptists historically have been firmly in favor of religious liberty to the point where we have fought for people of other religions to have the right to express their religion. And the ERLC has come out in favor, supporting Muslims in their having the right to build mosques. And a lot of more Reformed Southern Baptist really despise that because they don't see that as freedom of religion. They see that as us really building up the kingdom of Satan, might be a way that they would put it. So the ERLC has just always been a problem child for the SBC. I would have been fine with it being abolished, but I also think I'm in favor of changing it rather than just throwing it away. It's really hard to build something like that. And so that's really, and I know we're getting long here because I talk long, but this is the reason that I refuse to leave the Southern Baptist Convention, is because it's really difficult to build things. Christians historically have made a practice of building things that are incredible and pumping millions and millions of dollars into it and making it to where it'll last forever. And then we give it away and we hand it over to people who use it for horrible things. I mean, every Ivy League school in America was founded as a Christian university with a seminary for the purpose of training pastors. Every single one, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Brown, it doesn't matter. Every single one of them. We gave them up. We just handed them over, and they will last forever. And we can never build anything comparable to that again. It's not possible. We cannot do that again. We just handed it over. And the Southern, you look at the Presbyterians. You know, Princeton was everything to the Presbyterians, and then it was Westminster, and now you've even got questions about Westminster. I mean, there's so much going on. As a Southern Baptist, I look at it and I go, you can't have it. You absolutely can't have it. You can't have Southern Seminary. You can't have any of our work. You can't have it. You can't have NAM. You can't have the IMB. I won't give it to you. And I think the same thing with the ERLC. If the ERLC has a problem of being too liberal, my position isn't, well, we should just destroy it. I mean, you might as well burn down Princeton. The issue wasn't the institution. The issue is it's been polluted. So let's fix it, because it took a lot of work to build this thing, and I'm not going to let somebody take it. So I would be fine if they got rid of it, because I know that we could rebuild it, and I know it has problems, but at the same time, I don't want to. I don't necessarily want to start over.
Are you familiar with a young man by the name of Redeem Zoomer?
I've seen him through you. That's the only way I'm familiar with him.
Okay, that's fine. He is definitely a name that is quite divisive. He is a friend of the show. He's been on my show several times. Most recently, he debated Matthew Everhard on my show over the question of, should the conservatives have left the PCUSA, right? Should the PCA had been created when it was, or should they have stayed and fought, right? And the only reason I bring him up is what you're saying is almost kind of what he has been saying, is don't leave, stay and fight. And while I disagree with some of what he says, I do appreciate that part of his sentiment. It's like, you know what, if they took it away from us, we can take it back. That's his mindset. And again, I know a lot of people are going to hear me say that and say, oh, well, Redeem Zoomer's got a lot of problems. I agree. But the heart of what he's saying is, don't give it away, right? Don't let it be taken. And that's kind of what you just said about the SBC. You don't want it to be given away. You don't want it to be taken away, because we'll never build another SBC. Is that kind of, right. We're not going to, it's the biggest Protestant denomination, using that term in the way that we are. That's not going to be built the way it is again. Let's work with what we have and make it better. And that's what you're hoping to do. So you said you were wanting to put forward the same thing, the same motion that Brian did, but Brian did it in. Brian Gunter's a friend of the show. He's he and I have he hasn't been on my show, but we did a show together where we were representing different eschatological views, and he represented premillennialism. Obviously you and him share that doctrine against me. No. But Brian put forth tried to put forth the motion at the SBC regarding the the abolition and basically was shut down. I saw that video and I saw his posts about that. But you said you wanted to put forward the same motion?
Yeah, I was going to bring out the Devers amendment or the Devers resolution, just like Brian intended to. Actually, when you watch the SBC, I pop up like 3 times because I was trying to bring that out and it wasn't time yet. But I mean, there's like 30 microphones, and so they just go by who's in the queue. And so I just kept hitting the button to be in the queue. But yeah, he ended up being the one to bring it out, and it didn't go well, like you say.
But what was his ultimate goal, and yours too, since you wanted to do the same thing? What was the ultimate goal? Was to get the SBC to recognize abolitionism rather than just the pro-life position, or was it tell me what you guys wanted to accomplish?
So yeah, Senator Devers had written a resolution. When you write a resolution, it's a series, of whereases and then resolved. And it's not really even calling for action. It's not a motion. You're not making the motion that the SBC do something. You are stating that this is a position that the Southern Baptist Convention holds. And a lot of the time it is a call for action, but not inside the SBC. It's like a call for the overturning of Obergefell. That was a resolution. Well, Devers had written a resolution on equal protection for the unborn. And I think that was the name of the resolution. And we didn't even get to read it. It went to the resolutions committee. They considered that it was similar enough to another resolution that had been made that it didn't need to be brought out. And the resolution they said it was similar to was one that, honestly, and this is a critical point, it was peripherally and marginally mentioned that we believe that life begins at conception. That was literally the only thing that was said in the motion they said covered his, or the resolution that they said covered his. So I didn't think that was fair. I thought that they had kind of backdoored a way to get away from an abolitionist resolution coming to the floor. And so me and Brian were trying to make the motion that they bring the resolution to the floor, which is all we want is for you to read the resolution and let us vote on whether the Southern Baptist Convention affirms or doesn't affirm this resolution. And there was some sort of a weird parliamentarian moment where Brian thought he was going to get to speak in favor of bringing the resolution out, which I would have anticipated too, to be fair. But the parliamentarians on the platform said that when you're making a motion to bring out a resolution, you don't get to speak in favor of bringing out the resolution for whatever reason. I don't understand why, but they said that by Robert's rules, you don't get to speak in favor of it. You just get to make the motion that we bring that resolution out and read it and vote on it. And so President Presley, you see on the video, he says it's not debatable. And so we're going to go to a vote. And Brian, he was understandably shocked that he didn't get to speak in favor of his motion. He reacted, and I don't think people took his reaction favorably. So the vote ended up being, not even close. I don't think anybody really even knew what was being voted on. It was just the interaction between him and President Presley that most people were voting on. And truth be told, that's a lot of the Southern Baptist Convention. When we're voting on resolutions, it has a lot to do with who's making the motion and how they make it. It's the same thing with electing a president. When Ed Litton was elected president in 2021-ish, the only reason he was elected is because Fred Luter nominated him. And he had this great concluding line where Fred Luter was the first black guy to be the president of the SBC, really highly revered in the SBC. And he gets up and he says, "Take it from Fred, vote for Ed." And it was like, that was the end of it. He beat Al Mohler and Mike Stone. Al Mohler was running for president that year, and he beat Al Mohler, mostly because Fred Luter nominated and said, "Take it from Fred, vote for Ed." You got to bear in mind, you're in a room of 10, 15,000 Southern Baptists, and it's all your craziest uncles and grandpas, and everybody can make a motion and everybody gets to vote. And it's like, no, it's a mess. It is a freaking mess. So like, you can't be too shocked that it goes the way that it goes, but you do have to bear in mind that's who you're talking to. That's your constituency. When you're making a motion, you're in here with all the guys. Like last year in Indianapolis, there was a motion to stop saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I laughed when they made it because it's like, that's a completely sane motion to make. That makes sense. Why are we saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag? Why are we doing that? But you got to all bear in mind, you are in a room with 15,000 of your crazy uncles and grandpas. That motion's never going to pass, because the second you start saying, let's stop saying the pledge, it's like, commie, he's a commie, get him out of here. And it's just, it's not a chance. So it's hard to, the typical image that you have in your head of a Southern Baptist, pretty accurate. And those are the people that go to the meeting, and you have to convince them to vote with you. So I think that was probably the reason that the resolution didn't come out, was Brian, he didn't win over that constituency.
Where is the SBC next year?
Orlando.
Oh, I'm so going. I am totally going next year. That's only a couple hours from the house. I'm going to go. I'm going to dress in my Presbyterian outfit. I'm just going to walk around, and I'm just going to take pictures with people.
You should. I'll get you your name tag. Yeah.
Dude,
so
if I go, if I get to hang out with you, that's worth going. So I'll plan to be there for sure.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Well, brother, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. We've talked about a lot, and it's really clarified a lot for me, helped me understand some of the things that happen. And I know that there's people who watch this who are interested as well. And again, always joy to get to talk to you. So I'm going to thank you for being on the show, and say, if you have any last words before we sign off, let me know. Any last things you want to say?
If you're a Southern Baptist thinking about leaving the SBC, don't do it. We're going to turn this ship or sink it, but we're not giving up. And I pray you don't give up. Don't leave.
That's a good word. And I appreciate you making that call to folks. And again, I appreciate all that you do, my brother, my friend, and thank you for coming on the show again today. And I look forward to seeing you when we're preaching together in just a few weeks, right? We're going to be together again, right?
That's right. In Tullahoma.
Yep. For anybody who doesn't know, we're going to be at Tullahoma, Tennessee. We're going to be doing the roadmap to revival. James White will be there. Michael Shultz will be there. Keith Foskey, some guy named Keith Foskey will be there. Well, and several other guys. Jeffrey Rice is hosting it, and we're looking forward to all being together. Greg Moore will be there, and several folks. So, all right, brother. Well, God bless you. Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, I want to thank you again for watching Your Calvinist Podcast and being on with me today. I want to remind you that the best way you can support this show, if you're enjoying what we're doing, please go down and hit that subscribe button. That's always a big help. And if you enjoyed this particular episode, hit the thumbs up button. And if you didn't, hit the thumbs down button twice. Thanks for listening to Your Calvinist Podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I am your Calvinist. May God bless you.
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. So I mix a manly drink, then I hit the YouTube link, and I feel my troubles all melt away. Oh, it's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey, striving for superior theology and denominational unity, one joke at a time.
Not so fast, preacher man. Behold, it is I,